Ghost with Cats, Chapter 16. An Elk, a Bear, and a Pet. A short while later there was a noise behind the house that drew Tall's attention. Annie was walking out of the stables, leading a pair of horses. Breeze was following. He handed her the rifle he was carrying after she stepped up and sat on the horse. Tall approached the horses carefully. The only creatures this size in the kingdom tended to try to trample those who approached them before they became food. Boaz says there are elk in the high meadow. We're going to go after one. Do you want to ride along? We can saddle you a horse, she offered. I have never ridden a horse, and neither has Breeze, he stated. This is for Vorn. Breeze isn't riding. We don't have one sturdy enough to carry him. She laughed as she revealed. Boaz doesn't have any draft horses here. Boaz walked out leading another saddled horse. Do you wish to ride along, Mr. Tall, or take a nap? You had a long night with the rabbi. I do not require rest. I believe it would be pleasant to travel with you, Tall answered calmly. Boaz nodded, handing his reins to Annie. Vorn came from the house. Tall looked at him. Vorn immediately turned back into the house and returned a few moments later with Tall's heavy coat, gloves, and tinted glasses. Are your people telepathic? Annie asked Tall. Not exactly, he answered. Annie eyed him curiously, but didn't question him further. Boaz led a golden-colored horse out. It did not seem happy to be walking in the snow. Tall could feel its nervousness, and reached out with his mind, soothing the animal. He stroked its cheek, and it immediately calmed. He mounted as he had seen Annie do, and the caretaker watched him curiously, then turned, guiding them toward the trail up the mountain. Breeze trotted along behind them. Vorn and Tall carefully observed everything Annie and Boaz did while handling their horses. Vorn shared the knowledge Annie had given him with Tall, and he could feel Annie's thoughts hopefully encouraging him not to fall off. Tall could also feel Boaz's protectiveness of her, and it made him curious. He sensed Boaz felt he owed Annie a great debt of loyalty. After an hour, they reached the top of the ridge. There was a herd of 20 or so large animals, much larger than the buck she hunted for them. Annie called the animals elk. Boaz picked one out of the herd, a young bull with a lame leg. It would not survive the remaining winter. He and Annie both lined up the shot, but Annie brought the animal down. Boaz smiled, putting his rifle away unfired. He announced she was a better shot than her father. Breeze bellowed and ran out to where the young bull elk dropped. Breeze! Annie yelled at him. Don't you dare! But too late. The large, genetically engineered warrior was already indulging his craving on the fresh kill. Ew, I'm gonna puke again, Annie whined. He cannot resist, my lady. It is his nature, Vorn explained. I know, but it's so gross. Ew, she said again, gagging, and turned her horse away. Oh, I'm gonna ride over there. You go deal with that. Tell him he has to drink black coffee. When we get back, it's punishment. Oh, I'm gonna be sick. She jumped off her horse and began vomiting in the snow. Boaz shook his head and rode toward Breeze and the kill with Vorn. Are you unwell? Tall asked, holding the reins of both their horses. He had never seen someone vomit. It did not look very pleasant. I can't handle blood. I just can't. Not since. Ugh, I always puke. I would have been fine if he hadn't bit it. Just leave my horse and give me a few minutes, she pleaded, still gagging. She looked very pale. Tall handed her the reins of her horse. Are you sure I should leave you? He asked, concerned. I'll be okay. Just go. It's so embarrassing. I'm sorry. She apologized. She looked back toward where they were gutting the elk and started gagging again. I should have just rode away. Tall walked his horse over to Boaz and his servants. Why does blood make her unwell? He asked Boaz, feeling he would know. Boaz looked at him for a moment, then shrugged. She and her parents were visiting Rabbi Jacob in Israel. I was one of the family's bodyguards. The PLO began shelling and bombing and shooting in our area. For 10 hours we were trapped. No doctors, no medics, no help. Just us fighting for our lives. Her father, James, ordered her inside. She was going to fight, even though she was a crack shot. But Annie was only 14, so she began taking care of the wounded with Zia, my wife. Zia said Annalise reached up to wipe her tears when one of our neighbors died, then realized she wiped the woman's blood from her hand onto her face, and she threw up. She went, washed, and kept working. Later she threw up again, washed, and kept working. For hours she did this, over and over, but she did not quit helping the wounded. By the end of the day, she, her mother, and Zia were soaked to the skin in the blood of the wounded. Now she cannot stand the smell or sight of blood or even rare red meat. That day she helped save many lives, including mine, Boaz explained. She always finds strength where others would fail. She does not give up. Annalise is special. Vorn smiled. So we keep learning, Boaz. It seems to be. Annie's horse shrieked, interrupting their banter, and the sound was immediately followed by a rifle shot. They turned to see her horse fleeing. A large bear was standing over Annie. She was laying in the snow, unmoving. Breeze roared and charged the bear. It only took the giant bodyguard moments to cross the distance to the large predator. The snarling grizzly swiped at him, but its razor claws sliced Breeze's coat and arm open, but it did not pass the dense, bony cartilage plates under his thicker than normal skin. He punched it hard in the chest, backing it away from Annie. The bear bit and swiped, but the genetically engineered warrior was its match in strength and speed. Its instincts were no match for the warrior and his training. Finally, Breeze delivered a crushing blow to its head, killing it. He was so enraged that he continued beating the dead ursine. Master, he rages, Von warned. I know, Tall answered. I cannot pull him back. Tall strained against the rage consuming his sword pet, but Breeze's need to protect Annie was beyond even his control. Tall's eyes were white as he used his power to restrain Breeze. Normally, he could control a dozen who raged unamplified, but he was barely keeping Breeze from tearing the bear's carcass into pieces. Boaz stared in horror. Bull focused his power into his master, trying to bring Breeze back under control. No one noticed as Annie slowly pushed herself up until she stepped toward the out-of-control warrior. "Breeze, stop," she mumbled. The bear had struck her hard, and she hit her head on the ground. She was sure she had a concussion. Everything was spinning, but she needed to calm Breeze. "Breeze! Breeze! Stop it, Breeze!" She pulled at him, and he swung her as he moved his arm. He seemed surprised to see her hanging off of it. He lowered her to the ground in front of him. The center of his eyes were deep red with rage, like they were filled with blood. Strangely, she could feel Tall's mind pulling Breeze back from the place it went. "Enough, Breeze. Sit down now," she commanded calmly, in a quiet voice, and he obeyed, sitting on the blood-covered snow next to the dead bear. He was gasping for breath in the high altitude and shaking uncontrollably. She put her arms around his thick neck and stroked his cheek and bald head soothingly, as she spoke softly to him. "It's okay. You killed it. You saved me. Come back to us now. Your master is calling you. Listen and come back." Rule for daily life number 3. Be the person they expect. It took several minutes, but together Annie and Tall got Breeze back to his usual calm, childlike demeanor. When Breeze looked up at her, his eyes were their normal, deep gray-black again. "Breeze sorry," Breeze raged. "Breeze thought Lady Annie died." "It's okay, Shiny Head. You saved me. Thank you. But you're hurt, and we need to get you home. It's just you have to be careful when you rage, and always come back when your master calls, so we don't lose you. Do you understand?" She spoke very softly. He nodded. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye. She stood and wiped it away gently, focusing on him and not the blood-splattered snow all around them. She was glad she didn't have anything left in her stomach. "I think he's okay," she said shakily. Tall hugged her fiercely. He was shaking too. "I would not have gotten him back without you. Are you injured?" "I think I have whiplash. Bears swat hard," she said, and half smiled. Breeze just looked up at them, nodding and painfully smiling at her. "Lady Annie speaks the truth. Bears do swat hard." As Tall made an exasperated sound and Voice sighed, shaking his head, Boaz coughed a laugh around his cigarette and announced, "Well, I'm glad you two think it's funny. I think you scared 10 years out of me, Annie, and Breeze here, 20. That means I'll be dead tomorrow." Annie grinned at him. "Sorry, Boaz." "Let's take our meat and hope Little Bear doesn't have a big brother," he grumped as he kicked the giant carcass. A few minutes later, they just stood next to the dead bear before walking back to the horses. Annie waited as they gathered the elk meat. While they rode down the hill, Annie leaned against Tall's back, her arms around him. He kept one hand over her clasped hands. He felt strange. He never feared for another as he feared for her this day, not even his brothers when they faced the lottery. His sense of relief over her safety was almost overwhelming. He reached toward Vorn and found that his cipher was admiring the scenery, so he pulled his mind back and pondered his new feelings alone. Vorn felt his master's conflict over his newly discovered feelings, and felt that Tall should examine them on his own. So when Tall reached out to him, Vorn had broadcast a sense of wonder and amazement at the majestic Colorado mountains. Vorn felt Tall retreat into his mind to ponder his feelings, and he smiled. It was good for his master's heart to finally know more than duty or honor. They made their way down the mountain slowly. Back at the house, they found Annie's horse hiding in the barn. Boaz watched as Annie cleaned and stitched Brise's wounds. He was fascinated by the bone-like plates under the sword pet's thick skin, which protected him from the grizzly's claws. They were almost like scales. Annie had to stop twice to vomit. She apologized each time to Brise. When she finished, her work was clean and neat. Vorn processed the elk meat and made a hearty dinner for the men, and a simple vegetable soup with rice for Annie. After the meal, Brise got a cup of coffee. Brise, what are you doing? Annie asked, surprised. She had forgotten about the punishment she threatened him with after the bear attacked her. Lady Annie said Brise has to drink a cup of black coffee as punishment for making her puke again. So Brise is ready for his punishment, he answered, and he began drinking the black liquid and making the worst faces and gagging. Annie covered her mouth with her hand, almost laughing. Tears of amusement welled up in her eyes as Brise choked down her favorite beverage. Vorn and Tall watched unsurprised by Brise's obedience, but were amused by Annie's reaction to it. Boaz just observed the spectacle, chuckling. Coffee is ew. Brise is punished. Brise is sorry. Brise made Lady Annie puke. Please forgive. Brise begged in a strangled, choking voice as he grimaced about the coffee aftertaste. Are you going to vomit? She demanded coldly, folding her arms, but obviously trying not to laugh. Pets cannot vomit, but Brise thinks Brise may vomit. He gagged again. He kept sticking his tongue out of his mouth like a dog who had licked something unpleasant. Okay, Brise is forgiven, she said sternly, and she winked at Tall, who slightly smiled. Then she offered Brise a candy bar out of the pantry. The big male clone smiled at her gratefully and devoured the treat as she added, Come on, shiny head. Time to soak your bear-beaten body in the hot springs. Vorn leaned over to Tall and murmured in Eloh, Master, he is going to be so indulged by the time we return, he will be unable to return to his place. Perhaps, or perhaps he can help us better the station of his kind, so they do not live without hope, as Brise once did, Tall responded. He was watching Annie rinse the coffee cup and did not see his cipher smile.